Any questions or things you want to review before we start? Let me know when we're good to go.
I think we're good to go. Yeah, we have slides. I'm very excited about this show. This is something that we've talked about a lot. We're going to talk about it even more. Entrepreneurmobiles.
All right. So here's the pitch. Here's what you're going to walk with today. 10 cars that are under $10,000 that are great deals from entrepreneurs. Of course, we're not able to restrain ourselves to just 10 cars. And also, we're going to talk about some cars that are more expensive for those of you who want to ball out. We know a lot of you ballers out there. But you know what the baller thing to do is to drive an entrepreneur mobile. So before we get into today's list, we got to talk about the core concept of the entrepreneur mobile. Lay it on us, boss man.
Wrote an article and it's called Entrepreneurmobile. And here's the idea is when you're starting a business, you got to figure out a way to baseline. You got to figure out a way to get your expenses as low as possible. This is something I've been doing for a long time, which is buying cars that are fully depreciated, meaning they have basically lost all of their value.
Yes.
They're never going to be worth less. And buying them from a good buyer profile. So meaning somebody that's maintained them, kept them up in their maintenance, and they're good quality vehicles.
You know what's the number one thing people say when they buy a car? They say, I bought a new car, lost half its value, drove it off the lot.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur mobile is when you get it, turn the keys, drive off the lot, it's worth more. Because you're smart, you're scrappy, you can cut deals in other aspects of your life. And a lot of people have some fear around car buying. We're going to dispel some of that today, hopefully make you feel more comfortable that you can do this. If you can run a business, if you could even hold down a job, like that all stuff is way harder than buying one car that when you turn that key, it's worth more than it was before you did so. And that's the concept of the entrepreneur mobile. In order to do this, we've split out our favorite entrepreneur mobiles into a list including price and practical, utility, fun, and our favorite category, inspired by our buddy Corin, affordable prestige. Because the reality is a lot of what having a car is all about is making a statement about who you are. And especially if you're a business person, you want to drive in a professional, cool car that expresses economic competence. Now, if you're me and you're like a dirtbag cyclist, you might not care so much because I don't do client visits. I don't sit over important lunches with people who don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I can just drive the absolute most affordable van I can get my hands on. So everybody has different needs. And one of the things you pointed out to me is it's really important to know what you want here. Right. And we can talk through with some of you how to develop that idea. But this process is going to be a lot harder if just anything will suit your needs. And so we're going to go through that a little bit. So again, for those of you just joining, we're going to go over 10 cars under $10,000 that are a great deal for entrepreneurs, AKA the Entrepreneur Mobile. And we'll also do some baller mobiles as well. All right. So no talk of the Entrepreneur Mobile can start without the shit list. And I'll tell you what, the shit list is the hardest concept in this whole thing, because basically, if you want to follow the Tao of the Entrepreneur Mobile, you can't buy most cars.
Yeah, that's right. The shit list is actually bigger than the list of cars that you should buy. I can probably do the shit list off the top of my head, but let me know if I forget anything, because there's a lot of makes and models that you shouldn't buy. The reason you shouldn't buy these cars is because they're unreliable. They'll drop in value too fast if you buy them. They'll leave you stranded. They don't have any resale value. There's a million different reasons, but trust me,
expensive to maintain.
They're expensive to maintain. Trust me on the shit list. Just don't touch these cars. I mean, a lot of people get into situations with cars. They think they got a good deal. Maybe they did get a good deal on the price, and then they got to maintain it.
Right.
And then that's where you're going to lose all your money, is trying to maintain.
If you trust the Tao of the Entrepreneur Mobile and stick to the models that we talk about today, you won't encounter these problems. But I've had multiple experiences where I've sent Ian a link to like this badass car. The market knows things that I don't know. And it's like, dude, I can get this like BMW with like this huge 500 horsepower engine. It's like a 2014 and they're only asking $14,000 for it. And he's like, dude, you know why? Like the moment they put that thing on a machine, it's going to cost you $2,000 to you know, that kind of stuff.
I love me an M5, a BMW M5. The V10, it's a total dog. It would be on the shit list. It's going to cost you 3 times more to maintain it than it would to buy the car.
Right.
So,
so we want to avoid that kind of stuff at all costs. We want to keep you on the road. Also, safety is a big concern in this list. Something we can address model by model, but like safety and reliability, like if you don't have those two things, then what's the point of having the car? So we're not going to talk about like frivolous, fun, cult cars or anything like that. Shit list. Let's just go over it. Hyundai, Kia, as in any Hyundai or any Kia, even though they're not bad cars, some of the new ones.
Again, yeah, they're fine cars. All right, they've gotten to the point where they're keeping up in a lot of ways with Japanese engineering. The problem with these Korean cars is that they lose half their value basically overnight.
Dodge, any Dodge
product is a piece of junk. If you want to go out and buy, we're talking about prestige here in a little bit. If you want to go out and buy a Viper at a good price, I would endorse that. But there are very few Dodge products that I would endorse.
Any Ford or GM car.
It's simple.
And caveat, not truck or high performance versions.
Correct. So, buddy Chris Cage.
Any GM car. Yeah. That's like most cars in America, right? Or a huge percentage.
Middle of America, not really on the coast. But buddy Chris Cage came to us and we were going through this process and he was like, what should I buy? I really don't know what I should buy. I have no ideas for a car. I'm like, man, you haven't ever seen a car that you just like? Maybe the look of it, the color, anything. Nope. I just need a car. First link he sends me, Ford Focus. It's like, dude, you need more help than I thought you needed. I'm here for you.
We love you, Chris. Audi VW.
Total trash.
Audi VW? Oh man.
Total trash.
This is where people are going to start to get mad, boss man.
Get mad. And then you know what? When you buy one, you're going to be even madder because you're going to have to fix it. Look, there's a couple German auto manufacturers, Porsche, BMW, Mercedes. Audi VW is at the bottom of that list. The absolute bottom of that list. They are total garbage.
Chrysler. I mean, yeah, Chrysler. Volvo. What about Volvo, this sort of image of the reliable family station wagon?
Look, Volvo is not made by the Swedes anymore. The older Volvos are tanks from the 80s and even 70s. I think it was like 1995 or something like that. They partnered with Ford and then they started doing their own thing. I can't. Volvo is one of the safest cars on the road. There's a lot of other cars that are safe that are also reliable.
All right. Suzuki. Fair enough. Salvage or rebuilt car title. A lot of times when you're searching used listings online, you'll see just really, really sweet deals and they'll try to sell you on a salvage or rebuilt title. The reality is, as the buyer in the car market, because especially if you're seeking a category of things, basically you're in the power position always, right? Like even if it's unless you're buying like a specific model,
yeah, you're totally in the power position.
You're in the power position. So the idea is like just pass on every rebuilt title or salvage. Like no one car, like it's like that classic thing. Deals are like buses. There's always another one coming. So you really, I mean, the number one way the car industry gets you is like the hassle, the fear that it's just like, I need to be in wheels tomorrow. Well, as an entrepreneur, you own some of your time, so you don't need to be in wheels tomorrow. So take your time with this. I was telling Ian, in order to execute the Entrepreneurmobile strategy, it typically takes about 15 minutes to half an hour every night for about 2 to 3 weeks. And that doesn't include, well, that kind of includes like visits and test drives and all that kind of stuff. So it does take some time, but the result will be saving thousands of dollars.
I'll say this about salvage title cars. Basically what it means is at some point in the life of that car, there has been an event where the insurance company has said it's basically not worth repairing. And then at that point, they cut the owner a check or they take the car or whatever. And then in some states, you can get a new title for it, which is a salvage title. Problem is, you don't always know what the event was. So with a lot of older cars, it doesn't take much to wreck these cars. You know, a fender bender or something in a $3,000 car could potentially total it because the insurance company will try and charge $3,000 to fix it. That being said, I've been tempted many times. The problem is that you have zero resale value in these things.
Yeah.
So unless you're planning on doing something crazy with it, like making it into a race car or something like that, 100% just stay away from the salvage and rebuilt titles.
So again, the concept, if you're tracking like the price of your automobile over time, as an entrepreneur mobile owner, as a smart owner, you buy the thing at 5,000, you drive it for 3 or 4 years, and then you sell it for 4,000. So it costs you $1,000 amortized over 4 years or whatever it is. That's the concept we're working on here.
Patrick says, I drive an Audi A3, couldn't be happier. Look, there's going to be people that have cars on the shit list that couldn't be happier. I'm being a generalist here. And the reason I'm being a generalist is because everybody needs to be able to digest this information and make good decisions with it. If I put, I mean, I can tell you a couple Audis that are okay that you're probably not going to get a lemon. Maybe the A3 is one of them. I haven't done a bunch of research on that car and I haven't owned it. The reason we're putting this together and the reason we're making it simple is because a lot of people don't want to put a lot of energy into this.
Right.
Okay. They want to be able to just go to this list, pick out a car, say like, yeah, I like the Mazda 3. This has everything I want. Boom. It's on the approved list and you're not going to get screwed. Are there some exceptions? Certainly.
And a lot of people love their car brand image so much that it's worth it to them to pay hundreds of dollars a month to drive a car.
Sure.
And that's totally cool. This is about people who both want a great deal, want maybe an investment, and also people who want a baseline and people, entrepreneurs. Because look, it's like after your rent, it's like your car payment. That's the biggest thing for a lot of people. So before we get into our list, I think it would be cool for us to talk about our dream cars, because part of the motivation to do this is so that you can build wealth, so that you have your time. So maybe one day you will own your dream car. Of course, the surest way to kill a dream is to realize it.
That's why I haven't done it.
Well, I thought it would be cool if we revealed our respective dream cars as inspiration. Here's yours, boss man. Can we put that up on the screen? Can you guys see this car? Is that okay? Is my slideshow working okay for you guys? Tell us a little bit about your dream car, boss man.
That is a 2007 Porsche 911 GT3 RS in signal green. They didn't make too many of these. I'd take a 997.1, which this is, or a 997.2, but I really like the green. The 997.2 is a faster car. This is basically the last of the analog Porsches. And when I say analog, you can turn most of the nannies off. It has a 5-speed. What a nanny is basically is like a traction control, ABS, things like this, like that keep the car in control. You can turn most of that off in this car. So it's a very visceral car. It drives like I like a car to drive. It doesn't have paddle shifters or any of this crazy stuff. I don't like any of that electronics. I like to be one with the machine and responsible for when I go off the track and into the weeds. Cool. You know, that's my bad. Man, that's a nice car. I can't.
That's a nice car. Man, it's too emotional to sit here and talk about it. My dream car this is a Mercedes Sprinter van. It's not so much about the driving experience, but about the living experience, boss man. So all the action in this car happens in the back. Right now, I have multiple layouts of like my perfect Sprinter van. So I'm debating whether to like build it myself, to engage Ian as a independent contractor and consultant, or whether to find something. I'll probably end up finding something used, but it's really fun to the challenge of optimizing a small space to do all the things you need to do and to explore all your hobbies and your interests and your friends and the nation or wherever you are. All of America, you can basically drive around with one of these things. So that's my dream car. Something like this new is probably $140,000. So
4x4. They make a couple different versions of this too. There's the Dodge.
They make this one in Austin, Texas.
The Mercedes. There's the Ford.
Yeah.
And then there's all these companies that make conversions. So Sportsmobile.
This is a Sportsmobile.
This is a Sportsmobile. Yeah. Cool.
So anyway, this will remain a dream for some time. Okay. Let's talk about how we're set. Here's how these cars are going to get broke down. The first are the most boring. They're going to be based on price and practicality. Then we're going to have a utility list, so a useful car list. Then we're going to have a fun car list for those of you who love driving. And then we're going to have affordable prestige. These are like, the concept of the sleeper, Ian, like the car that doesn't look fast, but is really fast. We're going to have a list of cars for you guys that look really expensive and classy, but actually don't cost that much. In part because some of these cars that retailed for $100,000 or $80,000, often they have a sort of a softer secondary market, because who has all this cash to go and buy these expensive cars? Well, maybe an entrepreneur does. So talk a little bit about that. Are you ready to get on to price and practicality?
Let's do it.
Okay. So here's our price and practicality list. Our very first car, boss man. This beauty is a canary yellow Mazda 3. Kind of a cool little kit.
I've owned a bunch of these cars on this list, and I've definitely owned this one. Again, this list is going to be, there's other cars that could be on this list. I just want to create a simple list for people that are looking to get it done. And this is definitely one of the cars that'll get it done. This is a Mazda 3. This is a little four-door, what I call a ship box. Okay. This thing gets you from point A to point B. It's completely bottomed out in terms of its value. You can get these things from anywhere from $2,500 to 9,000 if you wanted to get a newer-ish one.
Yeah.
But I think the real value in this car is $2,500 to $5,500. This car has what's
you're seeing here a 2001 year model.
This is a 2001,
actually with a nice interior relative to in that class.
This is in terms of this class too. This is the most fun car to drive in this class.
Okay.
This
is a front wheel drive car.
It's a front wheel drive car. A couple things that are unique about this car. When you talk about like major maintenance events on these little 4-cylinder ship boxes, a timing belt is one of those things. It can cost you between $400 and $800 to replace, and you got to replace it every 80,000 miles. This thing has a timing chain, so that means that it's not going to need that kind of maintenance ever in its life. It's going to need all the other types of normal maintenance that you'll find in a car, but it's not going to need that. One thing about this car, this Mazda 3, is it's like notorious for blowing up AC air compressor or AC compressors. So the thing that drives your air conditioner. Not a big deal. It's like $300 to $500 every time it does it. That's just something to know about this car. If you find one and the AC is dead, that's probably the fix. But in general, this is a very reliable car that's bottomed out and is fun to drive.
All right. You also mentioned that the Mazda, there's another Mazda that...
I'd say the Miata's in this category, but we're going to throw it in the fun category as well. I mean, Mazda Miata, I have like, I don't know.
A million of them.
A bunch of them. They've completely bottomed out as well. Yeah.
All right. The next price and practical, this you might recognize as the Toyota Camry. This is a 2001.
That's a Corolla.
Sorry, Corolla.
Yeah. Dan's learning as we go along.
I'm learning as we go here.
But here's the thing: Toyota Camry and Corolla are pretty much interchangeable. Go for the 4-cylinder. It's a simpler engine. This is like the most boring car you can buy. But it's a Toyota product. It's going to last forever. Probably get 300,000 miles out of it.
Yes.
The other thing about this category that's important to note is that all these cars are fairly lightweight. That makes them probably not the safest, but that makes them very good on consumables. And when I say consumables, I mean tires, brakes, shocks, things like that. You have to change them very infrequently. When we start talking about things like Mercedes in the prestige category, you got to change those things more often because you're driving a 5,000-pound car. So not only will these cars be cheaper, they're going to be a little bit less safe, but they're going to be cheaper to maintain.
Personally, this would be like a good little city ripper for me, but I feel less comfortable if I was doing a lot of road trips and something like this.
I love it. Eric Dub says, ooh, sexy. Yeah, I totally agree.
All right, we're getting to the sexy part, Eric. Don't you worry. All right, our third on the price and practical, aka boring cars. What do we got there? We got a Honda CR-V.
Okay. Honda CR-V and a RAV4 around this generation, 2001, are pretty much interchangeable. As far as I'm concerned, they're 4-cylinder cars. A lot of them use the same 4-cylinder that they use in the car and the SUV. This is just a little bit, you'd have to look at the safety on these things. It's probably a little bit safer because it's a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Certainly you can put more crap in it. But if you want to drive an SUV or a mini SUV, I would recommend the RAV4 or this CR-V.
And also, we got to give a nod to the other Honda products that make some sense from this era. The Civic, the Accord, even the Acura TSX you mentioned would be a decent buy.
Yeah, I'd say the TSX can be on this list too. So for those of you that don't know, Acura and Honda are the same company. Acura is the luxury brand of Honda. I would tend to stay away from the V6 models of all those just because there's a bit of complexity. Like unless you want the power, just stay with the 4-cylinder. And the TSX is that car. It's got a inline 4 dead reliable motor, and it's got leather in it. So that's one of those, it's teetering on the prestige level,
Right.
But it's basically completely bottomed out. But you really cannot go wrong with a Honda or a Toyota product at this level of car. They've been making quality vehicles forever.
Yeah.
And you can pretty much pick any of them. And, again, that's why Dodge isn't on this list. Yes, I can pick 1 or 2 Dodges over the past 15 years that would go into this category, but I'm making blanket statements here. You have 2 manufacturers that have provided us with great quality engineering for like decades.
Right.
That's why it's so easy. Honda or Toyota, and yes, some Mazdas, and a couple Nissans, but I don't really want to go into that because again, I want this to be simple.
One thing before we get moving on to the utility category, which is our next category, for you business nerds out there, you might realize that we haven't talked about any new cars, and yet we're probably not going to talk about any.
We could talk about a couple. I got one to talk about.
Okay,
for sure,
we'll get to new cars, but part of the problem with new cars and part of the cool thing about buying a used car is that they're Lindy, which means that we have all the advantage of seeing how these cars have behaved over the years. And so you're buying into that behavior, just like you do when you hire an employee. You don't
totally right.
You want to see the sort of things they've done over the past 5 years. Whereas if you go out and buy the greatest and latest BMW's wacky new computerized engine, well, it's a crapshoot. But when you say things like that engine's, robust and powerful, that information is in the marketplace and we see how those engines have performed.
Yeah. When's the last time you saw a Dodge Avenger, 1995 Dodge Avenger on the street? Never, because they've been in a junkyard since 1996. All right. When's the last time you saw a Civic, a Honda Civic 95 on the street? Yesterday. This is the Lindy principle.
That's the Lindy principle. This is our utility list. So these are vehicles that are for those of you who have a specific use case in mind: sporting, business, stuff like that. So the first is, can you guess the most popular car in America for millionaires? So
yes, I know the answer.
Let's see if the first person who guesses it in the comments gets a high five, virtual high five, 6 foot away.
Hurry.
This car,
Camry, no.
This car is a little bit counterintuitive, but exactly what you'd expect. It's the most baller car on this list. Is anybody going to guess?
Pickup truck, you're getting close. Subaru.
You're getting closer.
Greg Berry, Subaru, no.
A pickup truck can actually make you money. That's why a baller would buy it.
Okay, but the real reason why the F-150 is the #1 car among millionaires is because it has a gross vehicle weight that allows it to be tax deductible.
Boom, there you go. So you make money when you buy this car. That's right. Your car has to be a certain weight to be like a commercial vehicle. And so, but you see it all the time. People who own farms, people who own small businesses, people who own bars and restaurants, they buy pickup trucks because you can use them. So why is the F-150 such a great buy?
Well, the F-150, and we're going to go to the second one, which I'd prefer over the F-150. Let's just go to it now.
There's a Chevy Silverado.
Basically interchangeable. I like the Chevy products in the trucks a lot better, though. Just, the fit and finish is a little bit better. I like the power plant.
From this year range, right?
From this year range. I've owned probably 3 of each. You really can't go wrong. I mean, this is Ford. This is Ford's #1 product that they've been manufacturing over a long time. I mean, this and the Mustang are what they're known for. I think if that car company imploded overnight, they would still make those 2 products: the F-150, F-250 a little bit, and then the Ford Mustang. So you really can't go wrong. In this make and model and year kind of era, I prefer the Chevrolet.
We're looking at this is a 2001 right here. Is that correct?
Correct. This is a 2001. Generally speaking, the 4x4s are going to be worth a little bit more than the 2-wheel drive. If you're not going off road, don't worry about it, but just know 4x4 is going to be worth a little bit more. Not really that much more maintenance, but it's going to be more valuable to somebody down the road, probably.
Cool. Next vehicle is a Honda Odyssey.
I just want to say actually this model about the trucks, real quick, is these are full-size trucks. If you're in Asia, you see all these like mid-size trucks, and certainly here in America, like we kind of got off that
Tacoma or a Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. And actually the Tacoma should be on this list. The Tacoma is a good truck. So if you want a mid-size truck, think about the Tacoma. That being said, I would not buy a mid-size Chevrolet. Like I wouldn't buy the Colorado. And Ford made a Ranger for a while. They don't even make it anymore, so don't even worry about that. But I think if you want a mid-size truck, something to add to this list that we should do, Dan, is add the Tacoma.
Cool. So if you want your bed covered, our next utility vehicle would be the Honda Odyssey. I have a 2011 pictured here.
Which is probably actually a little bit new for this list. I mean, I'm starting to see this era.
This is like $8,500, $9,000. So you will suffer some depreciation because this automobile will bottom out around $4,500 or $5,000.
Yeah.
So depending on how long you want to own these things, you got to work out your amortization math yourself. You know, this is a fourth gen, third gen.
Come on, man. This is your wheelhouse right here.
So, you know, you're gonna get a few more features with this car and whatever.
You have a third gen.
Yeah. So I've owned 2 of these cars.
You've owned the second gen and the third gen.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're just amazing cars. In fact, you know, I think they're nicer than the Toyota Sienna, but I don't think the Toyota Sienna would be a bad buy necessarily.
Totally. The deal with the deal with the Toyota Sienna, as far as I can tell, is they made less of them. There's less available. The Honda Odysseys, there's a million of them. Anytime you get on Craigslist,
they made, if you
20.
look at the production volume of these, they make like 350,000 in a year or something ridiculous. So they're everywhere. Again, you can be patient and find the exact one you want. Now, if you go on the YouTubes and you like watch mom blogs, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see some mom with some fancy shiny Chrysler Pacifica, and she's going to say, we just had to go with the stow and go seats. And it's like, dude, you don't buy a car because the seats go in the floor.
Well,
she's paying $20,000 for those seats.
She's paying more than that, buddy. At $80,000 when that thing's out of warranty and it takes a dump, you know, she's gonna wish she bought that Honda.
So no Chrysler, stick with the Honda and the Toyota in the minivan category. And for those of you who, like me, don't think of cars as an extension of identity and don't use cars that way, I think a minivan is the most practicality you can get for your dollar in the entire car market. And I'll argue that to the death with anybody. All right, guys, our next category. Now we're starting to get to the good stuff. These are our fun cars. The first one, an absolute classic. This is my favorite configuration right here. You're looking at a 1999 inline 6. So that's a pretty powerful little beast.
It's important. Yeah, 4-liter.
This is a 4x4 hard top, black on black.
You like
that's a Jeep Wrangler. That's a sexy car. Love
it. This generation of Jeep started in 1998, I think. But certainly the older Jeeps are cool as well. The Jeep has a cult following. So I mean, these Wranglers, they're always going to be worth $5,000.
I want to upgrade the Jeep following to religious following.
It is a religious
It's not
thing.
even cult.
They have like a wave and everything. When you drive by a Jeep, you get a little Jeep wave.
Here's the best part about driving this car. Left foot out the driver's door.
That's dangerous,
left
man.
foot dangling. Forget about putting your hand out. You put your foot out. It's great.
Derek Johnson says 4-liter, a legend. Yes, I agree. If you're going to buy a Jeep Wrangler, you have to get the inline 6 with the 4-liter. Okay. They've made a 4-cylinder in these Jeeps for a while. Real enthusiasts don't want this. So here's another thing about this list is you want to buy cars, especially in this fun category, that are appealing to other people so you can offload them when you want to offload them. If you have a 4-cylinder Jeep, you're going to find a sucker that just wants a Jeep that doesn't know it's a 4-cylinder probably, and you're going to get rid of it eventually, but you want to be able to get rid of it fast. And that's why you want this 4-liter. Also, the 4-liter is a great engine. You know, another Jeep that we can include on here is definitely the Wrangler, or excuse me, the Cherokee. The older Cherokees are fine too. They have the same engine in them.
Yeah.
If you want one of those, I mean, I see those things sometimes for like $1,500. It's crazy how they've bottomed out. The Wranglers, not so much, especially with the hardtop. That hardtop's probably worth $1,200.
Yeah. Cool. So the next fun car, one of the best looking cars on the list. Ooh, actually, this is the E46 M3. Actually, still one of the best looking cars on the list.
Let's talk a little bit about the costs involved here, because this first section of cars, they were completely depreciated. I've had it so they pay me. Like I buy the car for $3,000 and I sell it for $5,000 and I put $200 of maintenance into it. When we start to get in this fun category, there could be an element of cost depending on how you buy it. I don't want people to focus too much on trying to get the best deal. That's what I do. I'm good at it. I've been doing it forever. I can buy a car for less than it's worth if I wait long enough and sell it for more. I don't think people really want to get too involved with that. If you do, I'm happy to talk about that. But here's the idea. This car is a badass car. It's got 333 horsepower. Because of that, it's a little high strung. You're going to need to look for a couple things when you buy it. You're going to want to see maintenance records and things like that. It might cost you $20 to drive a month. When you think about that in the grand scheme of how much cars actually cost, if you pay retail and you walk up to a dealer, that is a ridiculous price.
I'll tell you this too. Think about all your fun expenses in life. Okay. What's fun? Playing an arcade game, $2. Going to the driving range, $10. Going to the bar, $25.
Yeah.
Watching a movie, $15 plus popcorn. This is a good bang for your fun buck for $20 a month is what I'm getting at here.
It totally is. And the reason why I'm excited about this car right now is because I'm starting to finally see these cars be sub $10,000. I tried to buy one a couple months ago for $6,000. Had a bunch of miles on it, but for $6,000, this is an ultimate machine.
Yeah.
BMW, the ultimate driving machine. The other car that I would put on this list that's not pictured is the older generation of this, which is the E36. I've owned like 4 of them. They are amazing cars.
They look a little bit better, I think.
I think they look more boring. This definitely looks more muscular. They're even easier to maintain. They have less electronics and they handle amazing. So if you want like ultimate fun car, like you can buy those for like $4,500.
Yeah.
Now, really nice ones, $15,000, but for $10,000 in the E36, which is the generation before this, is an amazing car.
Yeah.
These things have just started to get below $10,000, the E46.
Yeah, this E46 model was the first year that the M3 really became a muscle car.
Yeah. It's a great car, and you can drift them. Yes, you're right, Eric. You can.
All right.
Them.
Next fun car, guys. What do we got? Oh, we moved this around.
This is where it should be.
This is where it should be. So,
all right. So this is a Porsche Boxster. This is a mid-engine Porsche.
And again, we're still under the $10,000 potential.
Which is crazy.
Right,
because this car
we're going to branch out from the $10,000. Like, we're still under 10K here.
Yeah.
A Porsche.
You can drive a Porsche.
Did you say Porsche or Porsche?
Porsche. Yeah.
Porsche.
I'm American. And when I go to Europe, I say Porsche, of course. I don't want to be outed. These cars have completely bottomed out. It's amazing to see. I see these cars all the time for like $5,000. If you want a Porsche with a convertible, Porsche Boxster is the car to buy. There's some things that you need to look out for. The S model is definitely the more sought after, but the base model would be totally cool too.
Cool. More fun. Everybody ready for it? This one. I love this car. I mean,
this is your car. I think this is going to be your next car. I have a feeling.
The thing about, Ford with the F-150 and with this car, this is a Mustang GT. This is a 2005 year model. You got a convertible. You got those incredibly cool grill lights. What are they for? I don't know. Probably lighting up some field where you and a bunch of youth spontaneously bust out into a party. This car is amazing. It's in terms of fun to drive.
Yeah.
For the amount of money that you got to spend, they are so torquey that you don't need to drive fast in order to feel fast.
That's the word that we're all looking for when we think about the Mustang is torque. And the way that torque works, you got horsepower and you got torque, okay? Horsepower is a whole different story, right? The feeling of horsepower is different than the feeling of torque. And what I want to say is this is the reason why the Tesla is so exciting. If you've driven in one or you've driven it, because it has so much torque. So it just like rips you in the back of the seat. That's what you get in the Mustang. And you can basically do the speed limit and rip yourself in the back of the seat while doing it. And that's why the Mustang is so fun.
That's why it's so fun. You can be at 2,000 RPMs, shift into second gear, and just push the gas down, and you're at 25 miles an hour. You go to 30 miles an hour and you have the time of your damn life. And that's why people love Mustangs. And you can get this car for under $10,000.
You can. This is a 2005. I will mention 2011 to 14 has the Coyote motor in it, and it's like 400 horsepower. Man, that's a heck of a machine. And those are starting to get, $11,000 to $14,000, $15,000. I'm starting to see those almost dip down into this category. But for now, this would be the generation. This is the, I believe this is the SN197 platform.
So would you put the Porsche Cayman in this category, or do you want to save that?
I think that is in the next one.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
It's definitely the next one. Jeff says, what about the 80s Fox body with the 5-liter engine?
Ooh.
Here's the thing, Jeff.
Ooh.
There's a lot of cars not on this list. I've had 3 of those. They're amazing machines. The problem with those things is that they're starting to become collectibles now. So you can still find good deals on them every once in a while, but they're really climbing in value. So if you wanted an appreciating asset, that's probably one of those cars.
I saw a nice one the other day here in Austin go on the market for 10.5, for example. I mean, that's
which is crazy.
A lot of money for a really old car.
Well, that's basically around what they were new, between 10 and 15, depending on the year. So yeah, I agree with that. The 80s yes, they're becoming very collectible. These 80s Mustangs, the Cobra being the most collectible in 1993. I mean, I've seen those with low miles for $40,000 to $70,000. If you can find yourself a GT or an LX, it's got to be the V8 for sub $10,000 in really good shape. There's a good chance it'll be worth $20,000 5 years from now.
All right, everybody, are you ready to put on your fancy pants? Because we're about ready to go above the $10,000 mark. So we're going to go from deal seekers to balling out just a little bit, but balling out intelligently. If you got any comments or questions at the sub $10,000 level, now might be the time.
There's a couple of these cars that are going to be on the sub 10,000 too, and we'll point them out, but some of them are above 10,000.
Right, and it really depends on the model year and stuff like that. Is everybody ready to ball out?
Eric mentions Lexus. Yeah, I agree. Lexus is a Toyota product. I don't keep up with Lexuses that much because I'm not old enough. Like, I think you got to really be 60 or older. The IS300 is a cool car.
My mom's Entrepreneurmobile.
I think she's got an IS300.
Yeah.
That's a cool car for sure. Go for it. Yeah, I approve. I approve Lexus.
My mom even jokes that it's an old person's car, you know. So
well, the RX300 the RX300 is an interesting car because it's a luxury SUV. The problem happens with these luxury cars, and we're going to talk about this in the next section, but the problem is all the doodads and the gizmos, gadgets, leather, all this crap, crack, this thing doesn't work, that thing doesn't work.
Anything with like an eye in front of it, you don't want that. You don't want your car to be thinking too much for you, you know? All right. Any other comments, boss man? Or
let's get on to the next
prestigious one. Here we go. Affordable luxury. Here we go. Number one of Boss Man's all-time favorite cars. There's one sitting right in front of us.
Ooh, this is a beaut.
And this car has such a timeless design. If you ask the average person what year, this is a 2006 model in front of
Mine's a 2006.
This is a 2006.
It's older than this. This is the generation after that.
Okay, this is a newer one here, right?
Yep.
This 2006 here, a person off the street would say this car is 5 years old, 4 years old, whatever. It looks timeless. You get inside of it, you shut the left door. This is the Mercedes E350, and it's like clank. It's got that Mercedes thing. Is like, you ain't getting out of here unless you really pull.
And then you hit your leather seats, your heated leather seats. All right. Yeah. And then you turn up the 25 speaker sound system in it. Right.
What is this? An $85,000 car new?
$65,000 new. Mine's a 2006. It's the W211 platform. $65,000 new. I bought it with 65,000 miles on it for.
Wait for it. He fudges this number a little bit sometimes. Give us the real one.
$6,000.
$6,000.
Yeah, $6,000.
$6,000.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful car.
I mean, dude, the amount of luxury, and I've done absolutely nothing to it. Like, that's the truth. And here's why this car is on the list. Mercedes has been putting this 3.5 liter V6 in cars for a long time. And that's, again, the Lindy principle. It's like which engines have been around the longest, which will continue to be around. They put the same engine in this one that you're looking at right now, which is the 3.5 liter V6. There's a couple quirks here and there, but nothing to do with the power plant, which is going to rob you if you have to repair these things. There's a lot of other Mercedes that are like, there's really powerful AMG V8 Mercedes and all this stuff. The problem is that a lot of them are one-off engines. They haven't been around that long. They're massively complex. This E350 is as simple as it gets. It's a luxury vehicle with a dead simple power plant, and that's why it's on this list.
And honestly, like, if we're talking about prestige here, you look good in this car. This car makes you look classy. It makes you look thoughtful, successful. It just airs competence. Like, this is a competent, beautiful German automobile that's reliable, safe. And this beautiful example that you have in your driveway is 6,000, which is why we put a later year model here, because you can.
So yeah, these things are I'm starting to see these around 10,000. A really nice one be 15,000 with maybe 70, 80,000 miles on it. Let's say this about these Mercedes too. They're some of the safest cars on the road. Again, you can go online and you can look up the safety statistics of these cars. You can actually watch every single car get crashed. Okay, so
Just
the government,
imagine your loved ones in the seats.
I do it all the time because they show the dummies like shaking around. You can see the difference. You watch a video, go watch crash videos of Mercedes from the government getting crashed, and then go watch a video of a Mitsubishi whatever
Suzuki Sidekick.
Yeah, and I mean, the people in the back are dead. So it's interesting to me that this car, being as old as it is, 15 years old, is still one of the safest cars on the road.
All right.
Last thing about these Mercedes, and this is one of the reasons why I love Mercedes in general. I got a letter the other day. It's like Mercedes-Benz USA addressed to me. I open it up. They have a recall on the sunroof in this thing. They're like, hey, just want to let you know, there's a bonding agent in the sunroof here that could come unbonded, causing the sunroof to pop out. Please bring it into us. This is a recall. We will, if we find a fault, we'll fix it for free. They're recalling
a 2006
a 15-year-old car. Not many car companies do that. Mercedes is one of the ones that does that.
I'll tell you another car company that does that.
Here's the reason why they do it. Honda does it.
Honda does it.
The reason they do it is because the same reason that I like it. When I open that letter, I think, I'm buying another one of these, man.
I know what you entrepreneurs are out there thinking. Great direct response follow-up sequence.
Totally.
This is great. I get letters from Honda about my old ass vans as well, citing the most ridiculous things that don't need to get fixed, but offering to fix them 100% free. Bring that down to the Honda dealership. You're part of the Honda family because you bought some $6,000 beater from some bro off the street 2 years ago.
It's totally cool.
Awesome. It's so cool.
You know who doesn't do that? My last Chevrolet truck that developed a shake, brand new truck, developed a shake. It's like well documented on the internet. Roll into the Chevy dealership. We don't know what you're talking about. I mean, class action lawsuits, all this stuff. So, some of these car manufacturers, Mercedes and Honda being one of them, really stand behind their products.
All right, next car on the list. Woo! We put this is the 996. We were going to put this. You can't get these for under 10 grand yet, can you?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a Porsche 911. Is it? Yeah. 996.
Wait, are we in the we're in the prestige category. The last one, those are more than $10,000 too. That's part of the defining feature of this category. Is like you're gonna have to spend a couple dollars to maintain these things.
Got it. Yeah. So these cars are more expensive than $10,000.
But you can. I've seen a couple of these go for less than $10,000.
Okay.
But most of these are in the teens.
These cars are experiencing a little bit of a rebound because when they came out, if you look at the headlights here, this is the 911. So this is like the flagship Porsche sports car, the classic, the coolest car of all time, if you ask me.
It is.
But then in this model year, the 996, they have these, what do they call them? Like fried egg headlights?
They call them runny egg headlights. This is ridiculous. Everybody's going to forget about this.
The problem is when you looked at the range that year, they shared the same headlights as cars that were much less expensive.
And the Boxster and everything else. So it kind of sucked for the 911.
Don't do that in your product, business. If you're going to have a high-end product, you got to differentiate it. And Porsche failed to do that.
And Derek is absolutely right. He says, check the IMS bearing. There is a fault in these motors, and it's called the IMS bearing, and we don't need to get too much into it. But basically, if the IMS bearing has been upgraded or repaired, that is one of these cars that you want to buy. All right, and these went from 1999 to 2004, this generation. Again, this is a lot of car for a little bit of money. And especially if it's had the upgraded IMS bearing, that is definitely what you want to look for in these cars. And yeah, I have seen them for less than 10 grand, but I do think that these things are on a rebound. I think if you can find a really nice 911, 996, which I've seen for $12,000 to $15,000, there's a good chance a couple years from now it's going to be worth 20s. And in fact, I've seen like pristine examples, like 2004, a little bit of a different motor in it, going for like upper 20s again.
What's crazy about some of these cars, you can actually make money off of buying a used car. How crazy is that? So cool. All right, right here we have a BMW X3. Arguably, you could put this bad boy in the fun category.
This could be in the fun category. It could also be in the first category, which is less than $5,000, although I would not probably advocate buying one of these for less than $5,000. This is the first generation X3. Again, BMW and Mercedes, these engineers, they just think they're so damn smart, and they just start overcomplicating and over-engineering shit that doesn't need to be engineered. Like looking at
what they're
parts,
selling to, especially BMW.
It's awful to try and repair these things. But the first generation X3s, The 3-liter motor, the 2.5 stout, they've been making those motors forever. I would advocate for those. The newer ones, I probably wouldn't own without a warranty. I mean, there's just so many computers and sensors in these things.
Okay, so you're saying the model years that we recommend are 2003 to 2010.
Yeah, unless you want to, buy one with a warranty or expect a little bit more repair bills. That's the first generation.
So if I'm on the market, say for a 2008 X3, what kind of cash are we talking about, ballpark?
Oh man, I see these things for sub 10 all the time.
Okay.
All the time.
And again, you rock up to the business meeting, you rock up to the bowling alley, wherever you're going.
Yep.
You're going to look classy, competent, smart. This is a cool car.
Fun and safe too.
Yeah. Nice interiors as well. What do we got here? This is the BMW 330. This is a 4-door.
This is a 4-door. Somebody actually mentioned this in the comments earlier, so I'm glad that we get to surprise you with this.
Okay, so this is a 2006 year model.
Specifically, the 2006, I think, is the best year for the 330. There's a bunch of different variations. There's a 325. There's a 323 in Europe. That wasn't a very popular car.
They have a 2-door version as well.
They have a two-door version. But here's the thing about this 2006 330. Stout motor, and it was the last year before things got crazy. And when I mean crazy, in 2007 they went to a different motor, they had turbos, they had all this complexity. This is the last analog, very simple BMW to work on. So if you want something 4-door and you want something fun, and if you're like a BMW person instead of a Mercedes person, this would be the BMW that I would buy.
Now I want to foreshadow a controversial segment that Ian and I have coming up, a segment we're calling Racer Profiling. I've seen a few of these 330s, boss man, in the hands of tuners. Like a lot of people like to rip these things.
Some people like to rip them. I mean, but also this is the car that you show up to like the McMansion and it's sitting in the driveway next to the new Lexus. So buyer profile is important. Let's talk about that in a little bit.
This car ages well.
Eric says, I had a 07 328 and loved it. Yeah. 328. I can't remember if in 07, I think in 07 things got complex. I'd have to look back at that again. But if you want low repair bills, keep it simple.
All right. Here we got a Porsche Cayman.
Cayman.
Cayman. So Cayman was this model that sort of sits in between the 911 flagship and the small Boxster convertible.
Correct. So the Cayman is interesting. When the Cayman first came out, Porsche and a lot of people were scared that it was going to sabotage the 911 because it had very close figures to it, like horsepower, acceleration,
power to weight
handling.
ratio.
Yeah, it's a very, very good car. It's a mid-engine car, and I would recommend it. You're starting to see these Caymans actually go for the teens now, like middle teens. Cayman S, again, the S models and all the Porsches are like the upgraded models, not necessarily in trim, but in motor. If you're looking to spend a little bit, you don't want the normal Boxster, you can't afford the 911, Cayman's a good place to land.
Cool. Next car, and depending on the circles you run in, this may or may not be a prestige car. This is the classic Corvette. This is the C5 model years. And personally, I love what Corvette does. I love how much power and handling they give you for the money, I don't really love the look of this car. I don't really like the interior of this car.
The interior is dog shit. Let's just get right to it. I mean, it's just absolutely awful. Most GM interiors are awful, though, right?
Yeah. You almost feel like this is the top of the line sports car from GM, and you feel like you're getting into some sedan, or you know what I mean. It just feels like the most average kind of.
The seats are awful. Everything about it's awful. But you're driving a Corvette, and here's the thing: it's like the Mustang. It's got tons of torque. The Z06 of the same generation had 405 horsepower. Tons of car, and you're seeing these things completely bottomed out. The Corvette's one of these cars that loses value just like boom, just falls straight to the ground. The new generation Corvette came out. Everybody's like super excited about it. Mid-engine. It only comes in automatic, so I won't be buying that. It looks kind of
like a Ferrari.
It looks like a Ferrari. It's a ton of car for the price. But again, everything's just going to bottom out. I see these cars all day long for less than $10,000. If you wanted a really nice Z06 with low miles, you could probably find it for $15,000. It's a lot of car. This is a C5. The C6s are also dropping down into the teens, which is the newer generation. They didn't have the pop-up headlights. We actually took a battery out of one yesterday.
Yeah.
Be enjoying that later this week.
with a supercharger on it.
Twin turbo.
Twin turbo, sorry.
Yeah, 600 horsepower.
Fantastic.
If you don't hear from us, that's what happened.
All right. This one's an interesting one. This is one of my favorite cars on this list. Again, we're talking about affordable prestige.
Just want to mention this real quick. Derek says LS engines, though, good stuff. Again, Lindy principle. He's right. The LS engine is what's in the Corvette. It's what's in the Camaro. It's what's in the GM trucks, a variation of that. These motors have been around forever. Everybody's taking these motors and putting them in other things because they're so lightweight and they produce so much horsepower. So really, I mean, the power plant and the electronics is what's going to kill you on these cars. Not really the consumables, things like that. These LS engines are made to last. So the Corvette has an LS engine in it.
This car right here, the Toyota Prius.
This is on the prestige list.
This is on the prestige list. Yeah, because this is a car that, let's face it, is a car that says something about who you are. You know, if you want to project that you're, and even if you want to try and be, I suppose we can have a debate about that, but that you care about the environment, that you care about companies taking on progressive challenges. A lot of people buy the Prius for that very reason. And I think it does signal those things. In fact, I can think about my friends who drive Priuses, and they are conscientious people.
It's a signaling mechanism.
Yeah.
Like that is exactly what it is. And here's the thing. I've never owned a Prius. I don't know much about them, but they get great reliability reports. I still see first generation Priuses on the road. The biggest thing to think about with these hybrid cars is the battery. The battery is what's expensive. But here's the good news. Toyota's been making the Prius for so long now, and that there's so many companies that support it that you can get a new or replacement battery for relatively not so much money. So first thing you want to check is, like, when was the battery replaced on this thing? How old is it? If it's got an original battery, I think there's ways to tell, like, what the charge capacity is within the interface and all that. But you know what? It's like, this is actually the only hybrid car on the list, but the reason it's on the list is because they retain their value and because they're relatively inexpensive to fix.
Cool. Great gas mileage, goes without saying. Final car on the list. This, I always think of this as like the Matrix car. It might not be the exact one in the movie, but the Cadillac CTS-V.
This is
a Cadillac. This is a GM car.
Correct. You're right.
GM car.
I was going to say this is
all the rules. All the rules are out of here.
This is confrontational, man. This is a real confrontational car right here. And here's the reason it's on the list is because they don't seem to be losing their value. It has an LS motor in it again, so a very reliable motor. Yeah, fit and finish is GM, but here's the thing: if you have always wanted to drive a Cadillac, if you like the way that they look, if you like the way they sound, they're fast. CTS-V is the way to do it because that's their flagship Cadillac. And for whatever reason, a lot of people like this thing. And I'm seeing them for 25 grand, like 10 years old.
Well, they're fun to drive. They
are fun.
They're very, very fast cars. Okay, so that concludes the list of cars. What do we miss? Let us know what we missed. What do you disagree with? One thing that we didn't even bring up about all this is you're not allowed to take this list and go online and start searching through auto dealers who have these cars on their lots, because that would sort of defeat the point. Can you explain to us that angle, boss man?
You want to talk about racer profiling?
Oh yeah, a racer profile.
Okay,
but tell us about the dealer thing first, because I think that's
sure
a critical element.
So here's the way that these dealers work. A lot of times is there's these auctions, and basically when you trade a car into a dealership, like a Honda dealer, they'll decide, hey, I'm going to sell this car, resell it on my lot, or I'm going to turn it into the auction. Like if this is not up to my quality standards, or we just don't sell these kinds of cars, or whatever it is. They go into these auctions, and then these secondary dealers, which are sometimes shady, buy these cars at these auctions, and then they resell them to people. So
what you're getting to is margin.
There's a lot of margin that happens in the dealer. And there's a lot of shady things that happen in a dealer, but I think more important than shady is definitely margin. If you're trying to achieve the dreams of what an Entrepreneurmobile has to offer, you cannot buy a car from a dealer because there will not be any margin left.
And it sucks because if you search on Craigslist or on Auto Trader or whatever, and you don't click buy owner, and you click dealer and buy owner, you're going to see all these cars that look good to your eye, right? Because the dealers, they take nice photos, they shimmy them up, they, put a little turtle wax on them. And then the bottom line is that if they say 7,995 and you're like, oh, that looks cool because that car is so awesome. The reality is that's a $5,000 car.
Yeah.
And the difference between 7,995 and 5,000 to your personal finances is enormous. After tax income, how much you actually saving every year, like that's a big, big deal. The other thing is
racer profiling.
Well, we'll get to that, but I just want to say, like, it's the time. Like that car is right in front of you, ready to go. Here's the financing. Here's the number. Come down to the shop. To get to the 5,000 number is going to take you that 2 to 3 weeks, like we talked about, of 15 to 30 minutes a day on the internet, working the phones a little bit, working the email. Another deal will come. Your car will come up at 5,000, but you have to buy from owners. And we're going to call them racers today, aka drivers of these cars. And we're going to do some racer profiling.
So the other thing to note about the dealer, Dan, and this is what'll segue us into buying from individuals, is that the dealers, a lot of times, they don't have the records from the cars. Like they don't have the service records. They don't know the history of these cars. So you walk up, you're like, well, how's it been maintained? I don't know. Just got this car from an auction. The owner didn't pass on the papers with this car. So
they buy what they think they can sell.
So when we talk about profiling, this is how you do it.
Okay. So the first element of racer profiling is going Lindy with it. So you say that you can't buy a car from someone who's owned that car for less than a year, because it's almost like then they're a dealer. They're just passing this hot potato on to you.
Well, there's a lot of reasons why you'd pass on a car in a year. Most of them are not that interesting to me. Like, maybe it's like some financial problems or whatever. Okay. Number one, I don't want to buy a car from somebody most of the time that has financial problems, because that means that maybe they didn't or couldn't afford to keep it up. Right.
It's very expensive. Okay.
Maybe it means that they found a problem with the car in the last couple of months, and that's the reason they're getting rid of it. Oh, it's burning a bunch of oil, right? Got to put a quart of oil in it every week. And it's like, I got to get rid of this thing. And it takes you a year to figure that out sometimes.
Well, one of the principles here is that you typically want to buy from a racer who could afford much more car than they were driving. And here's the point. I read a statistic recently that suggested that the average American has less than $700 in savings. Well, for a lot of these cars on this list, the $80,000 maintenance might cost you $700, right? And so the real question, if you're buying from somebody who looks like they can't really quite afford the car, did they do the maintenance? Right? Can they afford it?
Right.
And you don't want to buy from that profile.
You don't want to buy from that profile. And I mean, that's just the reality of it, is like, if you pull up to a McMansion or you pull up a really nice house and they're selling a car and it looks like they could afford a lot more, chances are they've kept up with the maintenance, and chances are they have a stack of records to prove it. And chances are, if you want to get in the nitty gritty of it, it's got Michelin tires on there, some premium brand, not like Dan's van that has like 4 different tires all the way around. I mean, I'm serious. When you walk up to a car and it has 4 different tires on it, that means that this person could only afford to replace 1 tire at a time.
Yep.
What else couldn't they afford to do on that car? Jace mentions in the comment, you buy them with new tires and sell them when they need replacing. You're exactly right. Here's how these depreciation cycles work. And this is why we're talking about this, is because you want to buy this car and be cost neutral in it. If you can find a car that's been kept up to date with maintenance, new shocks, new brakes, all this stuff done, perfect. I'm going to buy it for this price. I'm going to drive it for 2 years. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. And then if the car is one of these cars that's appreciating or at least staying the same, chances are you can sell it for the same amount and not have to do any of the maintenance. Because most people don't think about this when they buy a car. They just think like, yeah, it drives great. Cool. Sounds good. It doesn't need new shocks now, but guess what? It's going to need new shocks in a year. So when you sell these cars is really important. And it's very rare, Dan, for me to own a car for more than 2 years for exactly this reason, which is I don't want to sink a bunch of money into it. Now, there's some exceptions. Like, I just had to do it with this Mercedes. I actually own this Mercedes for 3 years now, and it needed tires and it needed shocks. I bought it exactly like I described, with everything kind of good, right? And I thought, like, you know what? I really like this car. It's treating me right. It's doing everything I need. I don't think I can spend more and get more, really. So I decided to put a couple $100 into it.
Yep. Cool. Title in hand versus finance. How does that work?
Okay, so when you're buying these cars, the title is basically what says who owns the car. And you'll see on a lot of these listings, they say title in hand. What that means is that they fully paid off the car. If they don't have the title, it means that the bank has the title. So whoever financed the car. And that's okay, but the process is a little bit more difficult to get that title in your hand. Meaning what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go down to their bank and pay off the loan. And a lot of times you're not going to get a good deal on a car that has a title at the bank because they owe money on it. Say, for example, like the E350 Mercedes on this list. Okay. It's a $15,000 car. If you're wealthy, you probably paid that off and you have the title in hand. You bought it for $65,000. Maybe you walked out of there new. Okay. If you went and bought this car from a dealer for $17,500, you probably financed it through them. And that means that it's probably worth $13,500 when you go to sell it. And that means that you're probably upside down in your loan. So a lot of times these people aren't flexible in terms of their pricing because they can't be. Like they owe that much on the car. So when I'm looking for cars, I always look for a clean title in hand. If they owe money on the car and it's at the bank, chances are I'm not going to get a great deal on it. So that's why this is important.
Interesting. One other thing is that this strategy, I think, depends on developing a little bit of confidence in terms of this stuff is not rocket science. You can find 4 or 5 target models of cars and figure out the key maintenance intervals. And then you can offload that to the owner. If they don't know that the water pump needed to be replaced, if they don't have the documentation for that, you can ask them specifically about the tires. You can ask them specifically about the shocks. This stuff will take a little bit of time, 15 to 30 minutes, but it's a skill that you can have for a lifetime. You need to be in wheels. Well, who knows? We'll see about the driver.
Yeah,
what happens in terms of personal transportation. But this strategy depends on you having cash.
Yeah. So I call it Miata money at my house because that's what I run out the door with, right? So it's like I always keep a bit of cash on hand. And I think this is good just for general prepping, to have cash on hand, basically. So a lot of these deals that I'm chasing are like way under market value. What I mean by that is like somebody's like very incorrectly priced these vehicles, and I'll have to call them immediately and say like, I'm on my way. Okay. That leaves me no time to like go to the bank and like get cash out. What if it's Sunday? All that stuff. Keep some cash on hand so you can like run out the door and be ready to buy that car. Also, in terms of bargaining, if you're there with the cash, ready to buy the car, like that's an emotional thing for a seller, right? It's not like, well, I got to think about it or like I'm going to come back tomorrow. It's like, dude, I'm here right now, ready to buy this car for this price, which is probably a lot less than what you're asking.
Yes.
Will you do it? And they're just looking at the cash like, man, my problems are over tomorrow. Like I've had so many crazy people call me the last couple of days, like
especially on Craigslist. Like one of the cooler things about buying from owners is that they are dealing with so much crap. They are dealing with people trying to, oh, I want to buy your car, but I got to go down to the bank and get a loan. And they're dealing with these scum of the earth, low ballers who come by and are scammers, literally scammers. And then you call and all of a sudden you have a genuine interest in their car. You want to give it a good home. You want to solve this problem, because what a lot of people don't realize is that once they've listed that car on a service, they've just invited a bunch of problems into their personal home.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you can be the person that solves that for them.
Correct.
Okay, cool. That's all we got on our notes. We got any questions in the chat? Anything over there we should touch on, boss man?
It says it's Miata money 5K. You know what? It really depends on how much you're willing to spend for a car. I think whatever you're willing to spend, you should have that on cash on hand. Put it in a safe, hide it, whatever. You need to be ready for the opportunity when it strikes, because when it does, there's people like me. There's a lot of people like me on Craigslist that are seeing the same things. I mean, I have alerts set up, which I would recommend on Craigslist. Facebook Marketplace is another place to buy. I'm not on Facebook, and like I might be out of this whole game if I have to get on Facebook. I just despise it so much. I still buy on Craigslist. I buy on eBay sometimes. I buy on Auto Trader. But I also just like knock on doors and I get referrals now because I have so much deal flow. But I think for most people, Craigslist is still a decent place to buy a car. Another thing that you can do, again, I'm like, all my deals are time sensitive because I'm trying to get the best price. I don't really advocate that for this audience. I recommend getting the right car, the right maintenance, pay a little bit more even for it if you have to. Here's the other thing. If you've got a little bit of time and you've got a trusted mechanic, bring it to your mechanic. Don't feel like you got to figure out all this stuff on your own. A lot of people will let you test drive to your mechanic, especially if you give them some kind of deposit, like here's $500. I'm going to take this thing for the day. I'm going to drive it around. If you're a decent person, most people will let you do that. Real quick, Dan, I want to touch on values. How do you figure out if this is a good value or not? Well, there's a lot of ways to do that. NADA, Kelly Blue Book, KBB. These are sites that establish values for prices on cars based on a lot of different factors. You can go there, you can option out the car with the different options that you're looking at, and it'll print you out and say private party, which means person to person. That's the only kind of buying you should be doing, or dealer pricing, dealer to person. Don't worry about that. Private to private's what you want to do. And that'll give you a good idea of what this thing is worth. But also, it'll give you a good idea if you go online and you search for other cars and see what they're selling for. Most of the time, cars listed, general rule of thumb, anywhere from $500 to $3,000 off what the price is. A lot of people, most people, they put the car up there for the price that they want to get, but then they have what's called their bottom dollar, which is what they'll actually take for it. So part of your job as an investigator when you're going to look at these cars, and a lot of times this can only be done in person, is to try and get to these people's bottom dollar. What is your absolute rock bottom? And a lot of that, again, has to do with maybe if they owe money on it. It's like, look, man, I can't take less than $11,000 for this thing because that's what I owe on it. And a lot of those people are screwed. Eventually, they're going to take less than $11,000 for it. But you got to get to that bottom dollar number.
I've found myself in my previous van negotiations as being the first time was I had training wheels on from you and we did it together. And then the second time I did it myself and I still called you occasionally. And both times we positioned ourselves, we made this appeal that was calibrated towards the audience, towards the person, and try to get them to know them a little bit and position ourselves as the problem solver and as the person with the genuine interest in that vehicle. We would say, like, there's a reason we love this car, but there's also a reason why we can only afford what we can afford here, trying to calibrate where that bottom dollar might be. And the last car I purchased, the owner called me with exasperated tone saying, can you just come over here and I'm ready to accept your offer because I've had a really tough day. And if you ever posted anything on Craigslist, you know how tough it can be for these people that only do one transaction every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, especially for the buyer. We have some great questions. Keep popping them in here. This is a fun thing to talk about for us. On Craigslist, what if you see a scam note? The AMG, we talked about this, is Corey, and I actually talked to him about an AMG yesterday. Mercedes has 2 listings. Which is the legit one? Okay.
None of them.
Yeah. If you see 2 listings on Craigslist, it's probably a dealer, or sometimes it's somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, but a lot of times it's somebody that's spamming Craigslist and putting it across a bunch of different cities, and they're a curb stoner or an undercover dealer. So
what's a curb stoner?
Curb stoner is a slang term for a person that buys and sells cars without a license, basically.
Got it.
And in the United States, and I think it varies from state to state, you can sell up to like 5 or 6 a year without a license. But there's a lot of telltale signs on Craigslist. If it's a scam, is a tough word, but most of the time what you see on Craigslist is cars for sale by people that are actually dealers. So look for temporary tags on cars, like paper tags in America. A lot of times, if you're selling a car within 30 or 60 days, it'll have a temporary paper tag. If you see a car for sale and it has one of those, it's either a dealer or they're trying to get rid of that car real quick.
Posts that look a little too good, posts without any personal quirks. You can see like the kind of professionalism glaze in a lot of these.
Correct. If it's just like a list of features and functions on the car, most of the time that's a dealer or a scam. If you see something that's like written out and it's like in paragraph form, but not too much, but maybe there's like a personal story in there.
That's what you're going for.
That's what you're going for. And then you actually call them on the phone. They sound like a decent human being. That's what you're going for. And then they give you the address to where the car is and it's in a nice neighborhood. That's right. What you're going for.
And again, like, this has got to be the opposite of like maybe the car buying attitude I had when I was younger. You walk onto the car lot, you walk around, you see a car and you're like, damn, that's nice. Like, I want that. You can't have that attitude on Craigslist or on Auto Trader. You got to be the opposite, which is like, okay, there's 100,000 of those that were made.
Yeah.
I am basically going to have to pass on 9 out of 10 that like look good to my naive eye, and my more entrepreneur mobile eye is going to say it's got to fit all of these calculus, and this buyer has got to be amenable to my term, or seller has to be amenable to my terms before I take this car home. And that's going to take a few weeks, but you have an entrepreneur mobile, not something that's going to depreciate in your garage.
Tell you what, I've made a lot of actually I've met a lot of good people and somewhat friends doing this, like rocking up to people's houses. I used to have like a hard ass approach when I went to people's houses and tried to buy cars. Like, oh, look at this is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong. I'm gonna need $3,000 off, and people hate that. People hate to hear all the things that are wrong with the car that they probably loved for the past 5 years. There's a much softer way to do it. And I think like building a reputation, like actually connecting with people during these deals is really important. Because like you said, Dan, there's hundreds of these cars out there. There's hundreds of options. So finding somebody that you connect with during a deal, and like they'll divulge information to you. Like if you start connecting, you're like, yeah, man, it was an accident. Like, I backed into this pole and that's why this is painted.
If I remember, we were sitting in the living room of a really cool guy who had emigrated here from India, I believe it was. And he was telling us all about how this car, like they had gone on family trips in it and stuff. And he revealed a piece of information, or you found something and you were like, we kind of talked with him for a while and we said like, look, like we came here thinking this was worth $5,000. And because we heard what you said and we thought, and we were like, we think it's worth, $4,500 now. We need $500 extra off. And he was like, couldn't be happier to give us $500 off. He said, you guys, I can tell you're really good guys. Like, he was just happy to get rid of this problem, because the thing about him is he had this big, beautiful home. He had like a big job. He had a family. He didn't care so much about this van transaction. It wasn't like the big thing for him,
No, he was happy to connect with somebody.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's why it makes a difference if you can connect with people during this process, is because they're going to divulge to you more information than they probably put in the listing. So there's the two-sided benefit. One is that you actually get to connect with another human being and know them and maybe even become friends.
It's kind of cool and random.
It is. And then the other thing is that you're going to get to learn more about the vehicle that you're buying. Questions. Yes, this is awesome.
Questions.
Facebook is filled with dealers. You're right. Okay. Greg Berry says, what's the deal with Ferraris again? All right. There's a category on this list that we didn't get to talk about.
Greg right there. He's got his eye on the prize.
Oh, well, Mark B says, let's pull together some money and have Ian buy us a sweet Ferrari. I like that idea.
So there is this idea out there in the ether of getting an air-conditioned garage, and you put a bunch of appreciating assets in that garage, and then a bunch of people collectively own those things.
Here's what happened specifically in this last bull market, is that a lot of cars have appreciated to levels that a lot of people probably didn't think was possible. And they actually became assets that people are trading now, like stocks and artwork. And Ferrari's at the top of that list. Basically, what Ferrari does is they constrain production of their vehicles. And also they make it so not anybody can buy a Ferrari. If I walked into the Ferrari dealership right now with $500,000 in cash, I could not buy a new Ferrari because I do not own an old Ferrari. And when you start to look at some of the even more specialized premium Ferraris, it becomes the case that you have to own certain Ferraris to buy other certain Ferraris. So
Ferrari is the Rolex of cars, essentially, in terms of how they determine the market and how they cultivate their customer base. You cannot walk into a Rolex store and buy the coolest Daytona.
Yeah.
You have to go through the Rolex process so that they keep the value of those things.
They choke the supply, and because of that, the value is going up. So there's a bunch of Ferraris that have gone up hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last couple of years. Ferrari is just one of those makes, because there's limited production numbers, that it's a good buy, or at least it has been the last couple of years. So yeah, Jay says Ferrari Fund LLC. I totally agree with that. And the cool thing about these Ferraris is that a lot of time you can get away with driving them even for a couple thousand miles a year. And so you get to enjoy them, because the worst part about car collecting, and I've done a little bit of this, worst part is like owning these assets and you can't drive them, or you can't own them, or you can't enjoy them. So really you want to find something that you can enjoy and also own and look at. And Ferrari is definitely one of those makes. And there's what are some
other examples of, like, you got a lot of extra cash and you want to ball out on some car and you want to drive the thing, you want to have fun, but you don't want to lose your ass on it?
Well, the specialty, the premium models, so Porsche GT3s, RSs specifically,
The 911 GT3, the 911
the
RS.
911 GT3s, yeah, the Ford, the newer Ford GT, Ford GT40, whatever you want to call it. That's one of those cars that you can get away with driving some. I would stay away from the Lamborghinis. Those seem to depreciate a little bit faster. There's certain Lamborghinis that don't, but in general, it's not really in the same category as the Ferrari. There's hypercars out there that are appreciating like crazy. The Zonda. I'll tell you one car that I think is going to be
versus a supercar.
Yeah, like 1,000 horsepower, $2 million when it was new, kind of thing.
Yeah.
The one car that I think is completely underrated, and there's a bunch of Ferraris that are underrated, but one of the cars is one of my dream cars, is the Ferrari F40. This car was the baddest car back in the 90s, and it's just a race car for the street. It's barely street legal, and you're starting to see them in $1 million, $1.1 million, $1.3 million. I think it's one of those cars that's going to be worth $4 million in 5 years, depending on how the market goes. Because it's such an extreme example, and anybody that sees one, you just think like, number one for me is a piece of art.
Totally.
And this is just a race car on the street. So, buy the US version, by the way, because it has a better fuel tank. And I think the Euro or Japanese version, you got to replace every 3 years. And that's like a big deal, like $100,000, $300,000 deal. So,
are you willing to reveal to our limited audience some of your special homebrew picks?
For what category?
Any category of car that if you had a lot of cash sitting around right now that you might buy on a flyer, and it might be a cool thing to own, but also it might be worth, double in 5 or 10 years.
Well, one of the cars on my list, and actually member of the DC, and I don't need to name his name, but he's buying one of these, and this is definitely one of my dream cars, is a Porsche Singer 911.
Ooh.
Singer 911 is what this company is doing is it's basically, I think their tagline is Porsche Reimagine, and what they're doing is you send them your old Porsche and they completely restore it like to a new car standard, right?
So it's like this kind of classic body, modern running gear.
Yep. The carbon fiber panels, I mean, just beautiful. You spec out your interior, your exterior, and I think they used to go for like 300 grand, and now they're like 400 or 500 grand or something like that. And I think that they're holding their value very steady. So if you had that kind of money and you wanted to put it into something like that,
and this has been a trend for a while. People do it with classic Mustangs and Camaros as well, because you look at those classic Porsche bodies, and they're just so much cooler than the new ones. But if you drive them, you want to drive a new one, So it's like
most people, yeah. And there's a couple. I mean, there's these companies that are starting to crop up, and again, they're choking supply. So like Icon is one of them. They make old 4x4s and stuff like that, and they do them really tastefully. Like Ring Brothers does it for older muscle cars. So if you're buying one of these cars from these reputable brands, a lot of times, because there's so limited production, they're retaining their value. But in terms of production vehicles, or low production vehicles from mass manufacturers, it's hard to beat the investment of a Ferrari right now. I mean, most Porsches even drop. I mean, there's exceptions, like the 997 Porsche GT3 4.0 is one of those cars. It's still worth $450,000 because there's such limited production of them. But you don't really want to put a bunch of miles on that thing.
Yeah.
Where the Ferraris, you can kind of get away with putting some miles on them. In terms of like older cars, I don't know if that's interesting or not.
Sure. Just anything. I mean, because I don't think a ton of people are in the position where they're trying to buy a multi-$100,000 car and rip around.
So people in the comments are mentioning GTRs. I think that's true. The Nissan GTR is nicknamed Godzilla. It came to the United States in I don't know. I think it was like 2009. The car is full of electronics, very fast, very heavy. They don't seem to be going down below a certain price. The lowest I've seen them is like in the 40s, and a lot of them are in the 50s, 60s, 70s. But it's one of those cars where if you buy it right, there's a good chance that you can get away with driving it for free. Another car like that is the new Mustang GT350R, Shelby GT350R. Came out in 2015, I believe. I'm seeing them in the 40s and 50s. They really aren't going down below that. So if you can find one for 45, 46, you're not going to lose your money on that. What else is in that category? There's a lot of cars that are coming over from Japan right now. So America's always had this like affinity with Japanese cars because they always get the better trims and the better motors. And there's I think it's a 25 or 26-year import rule. So basically anything over 25 years, you can import in the United States now. And so a lot of people are bringing over these Skyline GTRs, things like that are 95 and older, basically. So look out for these like right-hand drive cars. There's starting to be a good market for that. I'm actually in the market for a right-hand drive car. It is a well, Suzuki. It's a little bit embarrassing. Yeah, it's actually on our shit list. It's a Suzuki Cappuccino, which is a little right-hand drive key car, or K car rather. And in Japan, they had all these rules about engine sizes, and if it was below a certain engine size, it was taxed differently. So all these cars are like 660 cc's, which is just like teeny. There's no American car really that has that size motor in it. But the car is also teeny. It's like smaller than a Miata.
Right.
And it's right-hand drive. So it's going to get a lot of looks and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Speaking of cappuccinos and Mustangs and Ferraris, I mean, if you're thinking about buying and investing in this time, you got to assume that it's not the daily drivers that are going to hit the markets first. It's that third recreational vehicle.
Yeah,
it's that fun car. I mean, we've already started to see some of these cool performance tuned up Mustangs coming onto the market at really nice prices. And, the secondary car, the weekend car.
Yeah, just think about it. I mean, people at some point, they got a bump. They're got a raise at work, and all of a sudden they had $25,000 sitting on their desk. I've always wanted this Roush Mustang, right? They went out and bought it. Lost my job last week in this recession that we're having here. What's the first thing to go?
And that's, again, these like tuner Mustangs, like we saw a Roush Mustang. It's like over 400 horsepower, low mileage, new car. You can pick it up for Miata money. It's absolutely ridiculous the kind of amount of car you can get when you follow this process and you buy in cash from individuals. It's incredible.
Looks like we're nearing the end here. If anybody else,
sorry, I just want to mention something that just occurred to me when I said that, is that for a lot of people, these automobiles never were a cash transaction, right? Like they financed this stuff. And so all of a sudden you come in with maybe one of the first cash moments in recent memory for them. It's like, this was always just a thing I did with the dealer. This was I got a raise and I could afford an extra $300 a month. And so I went down to the dealership and I bought this amazing muscle car or whatever. And now all of a sudden their lives have completely changed. Maybe they're a little bit sick of the car, or like they bought a minivan because they had some kids and they started a new business. And it's like, I don't really drive the Roush that much. Yeah. And here's a cool person standing in my driveway with $14,000 in cash. And meanwhile, everybody else is hucksters and all this. I'll just take the 14 and let this person enjoy it.
Totally.
And meanwhile, it never was $14,000 for them. It was just a payment.
Well, there's two types of people that do that. The people that are like you, and then the people that have excess wealth and very little time. And I've walked up to those people's driveways. The same thing. It's like, yeah, man, cool. Sounds good. Like totally over it. Like it's been a great car to me, but like they just don't care about the margin at that point. For a lot of people, it's like they've already used it. Like I spent $25,000 on this car 5 years ago.
Consumable.
I drove it. I enjoyed it. Whatever. Give me $12,000. I don't care. Like a lot of people have that feeling, especially people that can afford it. And that's a great place to be if you're a buyer. Cool.
Well, geez.
Woo!
Anybody surprised we went long? Wow.
I had a good time.
I had a good time. Maybe we should start a podcast about cars.
Maybe so. If you have any questions about buying cars, I mean, it's hard for me to answer these on an individual basis. But I think number one advice, just blanket advice, try and figure out what you want to get and then start browsing around, get a feel for it. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably don't have a huge sense of urgency. Like you don't have to get this done tomorrow. Give yourself some time. Allow yourself a month or two to get this done. If you wait and you're patient, the right deal is going to come up. The right buyer profile is going to come up. The right price is going to come up. All this stuff is going to fall into your lap, and maybe even more so now that this recession is hitting. So if you're thinking about getting a new car, give yourself some time, some patience. Do what Dan said, which is get on Craigslist for 15, 30 minutes a day, browse. I'm at the point now, Dan, where I'm like browsing Craigslist. Like I know intuitively, like bad deal, bad deal, bad deal. Okay, that's getting close to my no-brainer. Bad deal, bad deal. I mean, I just scroll. And if you can hit the filter Mazda 3, you should be able to just look down this list. Okay, that one's got paper plates on it. Okay, that one has a bad description. Okay, this one, this one, this one. And you should be able to just do this stuff real quick.
Cool. All right. Thanks, boss man. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for joining us in the Pod Shop. We'll be back Monday at 12 p.m. New York City time.
See you guys.
Joining us.